In 1972, Stanley Kubrick released what was to some one of the greatest movies ever made. A Clockwork Orange was meant to be divisive. Kubrick's craft was at a height for him, and it is readily apparent. There are reports from the set that Kubrick wanted to remain as faithful to the book as possible, even bringing a copy of it along with him while directing. It was, in its entirety, a product of an obsessive and addictive process. Just look at its use of color compared to other movies that came out in the early 70s. Its dialogue and acting are incredibly faithful. Its framing is almost perfect. Its shock value, incredible. And Anthony Burgess, the author of the book, hated it. This is not unusual. As a published author myself, I find it incredibly hard to imagine anything I write looking good in any other medium. Prose and literature is simply too important to me, too mutually exclusive of a craft. Something is always lost in the exchange. This is, unfortunately, a vivid reality of publishing too. Even publishing a novel can take a toll on the content of a piece of literature. The books you hold in your hand, the ones you buy from publishing companies, are almost certainly different from how the author imagined. This reality is one Anthony Burgess had particular experience with. A lot of people ask, what is A Clockwork Orange, the novel, about? And is it really that different from the movie? Well, in order to understand that, I will, as I usually do, pressure you to read the novel yourself. It might be intimidating at first. The language, which consists mostly of a slang Burgess invented for the story, is pretty strange and atypical. But don't be discouraged. This is something you can understand, and Burgess's slang is written so well that it has a way of making sense, regardless of your memorization skills. This is no Finnegan's Wake or Mrs. Dalloway, and in fact, A Clockwork Orange, as a whole, is pretty fun to read. A quick note, I do not have the correct accent to give this prose justice. If you're interested in hearing how Burgess himself pronounced and spoke the words he invented, there are multiple recordings of him reading his work aloud. I will link one of them in the description. What's it gonna be then, eh? There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. Dim being really dim. And we sat in the crew of a milk bar, making up our russadux what to do with the evening. A flip dark chill winter bastard, though dry. The Crova Milk Bar was a milk plus mesto, and you may, oh my brothers, have forgotten what these mestos were like. Things changing so score these days, and everybody very quick to forget. Newspapers not being read much neither. Well, what they sold there was a milk plus something else. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new veshises which they used to put into the old Moloko, so you could peat it with Velicet or Synthmesk or Drencrom, or one or two other vestiges, which would give you a nice quiet hour show 15 minutes admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints in your left shoe, with lights bursting all over your mosque. Or, you could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and this would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20-1, and that was what we were peating the evening I'm starting off this story with. But to really understand what A Clockwork Orange, the novel, is about, we need to understand what happened to it. You see, Burgess wrote A Clockwork Orange in a particular way. He started with a number. 21. 21 was important to Burgess because it symbolized an age of maturity, a symbol of what a society considers a grown adult. From that number, he created 3 sections, each with 7 chapters. The total chapter count would then reach that symbol. But wait, some of you might say, especially those who were born in America. My copy of A Clockwork Orange only has 20 chapters, 2 sections of 7, and a third of only 6. Well, you see, Burgess in 1962 didn't have a lot of money. He managed to cobble together a story that he, at the time, thought was worthwhile in about 3 weeks. He managed to get it published in Britain, and it made a fair amount. He subsequently got an editor in America to have it published internationally. This editor told Burgess that the final chapter simply wasn't realistic, and that it needed to be cut out. After all, Americans liked darker endings to their stories, and realism was all the rage. So, faced with the need of money and the lack of time, Burgess accepted the offer, publishing his book without its important 21st chapter, immatured and neutered. And things remained like this for 24 years. Finally, in 1986, the book was published with its missing chapter included, 14 years after Kubrick's movie. Now wait, again, you might say, Stanley Kubrick was living in England when he directed A Clockwork Orange. Shouldn't he have access to the full text? I would reply with, wow, you really know a lot about Stanley Kubrick, but then I would also say that he did, but admitted that he didn't really care for the last chapter and hadn't even read the full uncut novel until he was almost completely done producing the movie. The version he brought along to shoots was the American version. I guess Burgess's editor was right. American audiences really did like sadder endings. So what was in that 21st chapter? What happened during the mature parts of the plot? Well, we don't need to go too far to guess. In fact, this destruction of the story, this revocation of power over the narrative that was driven by these poor adaptations, drove Burgess mad. The movie, which was particularly brutal for the time, led to a massive bannings and controversies surrounding the book. Multiple libraries and schools had the book removed from shelves due to the infamy of the film. And just like that, all nuance was squeezed out. This was such a profound disappointment to Burgess that when the novel was finally published entire in the US, he included an introduction written by himself, called A Clockwork Orange, Resucked. The rest of the world was sold the book out of Great Britain, and so most versions, certainly the French, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, Russian, Hebrew, Romanian, and German translations, have the original 21 chapters. Now, when Kubrick made his film, though he made it in England, he followed the American version and, so it seemed to his audiences outside of America, ended the story somewhat prematurely. Audiences did not exactly clamor for their money back, but they wondered why Kubrick left out the denouement. People wrote to me about this. Indeed, much of my later life has been expended on Xeroxing statements of intention and the frustration of intention, while both Kubrick and my New York publisher coolly bask in the rewards of their misdemeanor. Life is, of course, terrible. In fact, not only does Burgess attempt to explain to the readers the error of both the movie and the publishers, he even sees it necessary to explain the point of his novel. Something authors rarely do. I have never read an introduction quite like this one. The 21st chapter gives the novel the quality of genuine fiction, an art founded on the principle that human beings change. There is, in fact, not much point in writing a novel unless you can show the possibility of moral transformation, or an increase in wisdom operating in your chief character or characters. Even trashy bestsellers show people changing. When a fictional work fails to show change, when it merely indicates that human character is set, stony, unregenerable, then you are out of the field of the novel and into that of the fable or allegory. The American or Kubrickian Orange is a fable. The British or world one is a novel. It wouldn't be unheard of to hear this and think it rather oxymoronic. After all, in the 20 chapters, our main character, Alex DeLarge, does do some horrendous things. He and his gang members, his droogs, go on multiple sprees of violent crime, including theft, assault, rape, and murder. Alex, who is only 16, then goes home and listens to classical music like nothing has happened, only for it all to happen again the next day. Even after his capture by police, wherein he is tortured with the Ludovico technique, a form of Skinnerian conditioning that shows him acts of violence while giving him drugs to make him nauseous, is a pretty brutal scene. Slowly, the need for violence is puked out of him. His mind is forced to associate his crimes, and the thought of crime, with physical sickness. And in the end, if you are American, or only absorb the story through the film, it didn't even work. He gets out, and after a while attempts to do violence again. He becomes deconditioned, and we arrive back at the start. Alex is still a young delinquent. Even if the 21st chapter is reclamatory, Does Burgess really get to be disappointed when people latch on to the darker aspects of his story? It seems priggish, or Pollyannish, to deny that my intention in writing the work was to titillate the nastier propensities of my readers. My own healthy inheritance of original sin comes out in the book, and I enjoy raping and ripping by proxy. It is the novelist's innate cowardice that makes him depute to imaginary personalities the sins that he is too cautious to commit for himself. But the book does also have a moral lesson, and it is the weary traditional one of the fundamental importance of moral choice. It is because this lesson sticks out like a sore thumb that I tend to disparage A Clockwork Orange as a work too didactic to be artistic. It is not the novelist's job to preach, it is his duty to show. I have shown enough, though the curtain of an invented lingo gets in the way, another aspect of my cowardice. Nadsat, a Russified version of English, was meant to muffle the raw response we expect from pornography. It turns the book into a linguistic adventure. People preferred the film because they are scared, rightly, of language. Burgess is saying that capturing the audience is indeed something he needed to do, and the doubts about the validity of his original message slip into this admission. But he is right. The story does have a moral point. It is not like its film counterpart, simply an experience, and while it has the cowardice of style and flair and disgust, it also has a point, and Burgess deserves that point to be known. So, what is A Clockwork Orange about? After being released from the prison where he was conditioned, Alex's parents disown him, and he is attacked. First by people he had wronged before, and then by his old friends who used to go pillaging with him, but who are now police officers of all things. He finds himself wandering around and meets an old man who invites him into his home. Alex realizes that this is the same house they attacked before his arrest, and he finds out that the woman they raped has died of her injuries. Her husband, the old man, finds this out and locks him in an upper room and blares the classical music that Alex has also been conditioned to hate. Alex jumps out of the window in an attempt to end his own life. He wakes up at the hospital, where his conditioning is tested. Either the fall or his hospital stay has deconditioned him, and he starts to daydream about murdering and pillaging again. The chapter, which is the 20th, ends with the ironic words, "I was cured all right." After the 20th chapter, we skip forward a bit in time. Here Alex has a new gang, and they prepare for a night out of their usual ultraviolence. But this one is different. While on the street, he meets up with one more friend, Pete, from his original group. Pete, who no longer speaks in their fictive slang, has turned his life around. He has a wife, a family, and he finds Alex peculiar and strange. Now, as we return to Alex's thoughts, we get something a little different. I kept videoing visions, like these cartoons in the gazettes. There was your humble narrator Alex coming home from work to a good hot plate of dinner, and there was this Petitza all welcoming and greeting like loving. But I could not video at all the horror show brothers. I could not think who it might be. But I had this sudden, very strong idea that if I walked into the room next to this room, where the fire was burning away and my hot dinner laid on the table, there I should find what I really wanted. And now it all tied up. That picture scissored out of the Gazetta, and meeting old Pete like that. For in that other room, in a cot, was lying gurgling goo goo goo, my son. Yes, my brothers, my son. And now I felt this big hollow inside my plot, feeling very surprised to it myself. I knew what was happening, oh my brothers. I was growing up. Yes, there it was. Youth must go. Ah, yes. But youth is only being, in a way, like it might be an animal. Now, it is not just like being an animal, so much as it's like being one of those Malenki toys you viddy being sold in the streets. Like little Chelovics, made out of tin and a spring inside, and then a winding handle on the outside, and you wind it up, gur, and off it iddies, like walking, oh my brothers. But it iddies in a straight line and bangs straight into things, bang, bang, and it cannot help what it is doing. Being young is like being like one of those Malenki machines. My son. My son. When I had my son, I would explain all that to him, when he was starry enough to understand, but then I knew he would not understand, or would not want to understand at all, and would do all the veshes as I had done. Yes, perhaps even killing some poor starry fella, surrounded with mewing cots and koshkas, and I'd not be able to really stop him. And nor would he be able to stop his own son, brothers. And so it would iddy on, until like the end of the world, round and round and round, like some bolshy gigantic like Chelovik, like old Bog himself, by courtesy of Kurova Milk Bar, turning and turning and turning a Vonnie Grasny Orange in his gigantic rookers. But first of all, brothers, there was this vesh of finding some devoshka or other that would be mother to this son. I'd have to start on that tomorrow, I kept thinking. That was something like new to do. That was something I'd have to get started on. A new, chapter beginning. That's going to be then, brothers. As I come to the end of this tale, you've been everywhere with your little droog, Alex, suffering with him, and you have viddied some of the most grassy brotchnies old Bog ever made. All on your old droog, Alex. And all it was that I was young. But now as I end this story, brothers, I am not young. Not no longer. Oh no. Alex, groweth up. Oh yes. But where I iddy now, oh my brothers, is all on my Odinoki, where you cannot go. Tomorrow is all like sweet flowers in the turning Vonnie earth, and the stars and the old Luna up there, and your old droog Alex all in his Odinoki seeking like a mate, and all that cal. Terrible Grasny Vonnie world, really, oh my brothers. And so, farewell from your little droog, and to all others in this story profound shooms of Lipmix Burr, and they can giss my sharies, but you, oh my brothers, remember sometimes thy little Alex that was. Amen. And all that cal. Alex has a dream, and in that vision he, all of a sudden, has a moment of maturity, a moment of anticipation for what he could become, catalyzed by the image of a child he could call his son. In that image, too, he wants to teach that child that all of the violence, all of the crimes he committed and were about to commit just that morning, aren't what life is about, and that he grew out of it. But along with this realization comes the truth of A Clockwork Orange. He won't be able to teach the violence out of his son. He won't be able to force him to live like an adult before he knows what that means. The son, regardless of all the warnings and rules and authorities, will still be a child. He will break rules because that's what children do, sometimes to drastic effect. But what matters, what really matters in the end, is that we are given the choice. We must be able to make mistakes and grow out of those mistakes. There is no other way to mature. There is no scientific shortcut, no mechanism by which we can circumvent youth and hasten the inevitable process of growing up. We must let people mature. We must allow them the chance to choose, the chance to decide what their life is going to be. And here, in this 21st chapter, is where we can finally reach that crux, as stated by Burgess years later in Frustration and Exasperation. Clockwork oranges don't exist, except in the speech of old Londoners. The image is a bizarre one, always used for a bizarre thing. He's as queer as a clockwork orange meant he was queer to the limit of queerness. I mean it to stand for the application of a mechanistic morality to a living organism, oozing with juice and sweetness. Readers of the 21st chapter must decide for themselves whether it enhances the book they presumably know, or is really a discardable limb. I meant the book to end in this way, but my aesthetic judgments may have been faulty. Writers are rarely their own best critics, nor are critics. Quod scripsi, scripsi, said Pontius Pilate when he made Jesus Christ the King of the Jews. What I have written, I have written. We can destroy what we have written, but we cannot unwrite it. I leave what I wrote with what Dr. Johnson called frigid indifference to the judgment of that 0.1% of the American population which cares about such things. Eat this Swedish segment or spit it out. You are free. A Clockwork Orange is not, in truth, what it has become. and is not a Kubrickian commitment to style, or an American tour de force against some Orwellian bureaucracy. It is, instead, a testament to the realization that humans can be ugly things, especially at the start of our long journeys. But even if we had a Ludovico technique of our own, even if we could reach inside an unripe person and pull out all of the bad bits and pieces and replace them with frictionless wheels and cogs, even if we could make a perfectly ticking Clockwork Orange, it wouldn't taste nearly as sweet.